Hello, welcome to the December 16th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field, or questions can be sent in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase or your Steinberg software that you're running. So if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 13, 14, or 15, and the operating system, such as Windows or Mac OS, that information is often helpful. My ability to answer questions in a real-time manner. I may be playing catch-up throughout the live stream, depending on the number of questions. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We will get through all of them in order. We should have an index of all of the topics with timestamps pinned to the top of the comments field a couple hours after the live stream ends. So if you go to look at the comments, and if you wanted to search for comments and topics been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan for creating that website from Stockholm. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. We'll also give an extra round of gratitude. We'll express towards Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So you could get different links, tutorials, downloads directly from there. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Just a quick programming note, the last live stream of the year before the holidays will be this upcoming Friday, so in 3 days. And since it will be the last live stream of the month, that usually means that we do a Zoom social meetup. So we'll go for about 2 hours on Friday and then have a Zoom social meetup starting at about 2 hours into the live stream. And then we'll resume, I think maybe January 5th or 6th, something along those lines. And we'll ramp up again going into 2026. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So we see for Constantine Official, says, hey, thanks for doing this again. Really enjoying them. Says, I had a couple of questions. First one is, what do you think of the Steinberg CMC controllers, and do they still work? So the CMC controllers will still work. They may not on the Mac OS. I don't think that their MIDI drivers were updated to be working with Apple Silicon, or maybe past a particular operating system. I think that you could still get them to work on Windows, but I don't think that they will currently work on contemporary Mac OS versions. So the next question. Also, the Avid Artist series, do they work well with Nuendo and Cubase? So yeah, we have full Yukon support. Actually, Yukon, when it was Euphonics controllers before they were acquired by Avid, you can just simply, Yukon was co-developed by Steinberg and Euphonics, but when we come over here, what you would want to do is just, you want to just add a Yukon device. So if I'll just come here, and then, so if you go to your device setup, so again, go to your studio menu, to studio setup rather, device setups, previous versions. You'll see this little plus sign, and then you could just simply add a Yukon control, and when that is connected at that point, you could just simply have full access to for the Euphonics controllers, and that goes all the way from like a system like an artist series up to like a System 5 MC as well. All right, so we see Tim as Sabertooth Bicycle joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Stella and other pets that are nearby, and he's ready to learn. All right, Constantino official asks, lastly, would it be possible to at least be able to get full screen in macOS as an update with Nuendo 14? I feel it's a very basic thing to have. I bought it a few weeks ago. So I can tell you that within Cubase 15, it now offers full screen support. So when we kind of click here on this in the Mac OS, we could just say, okay, we want to have full screen support. So now as we do this, I'm not sure if that will be added in Nuendo 14, or that might come, if I were to guess and speculate, and it's purely speculation on my part, that Nuendo 15 would kind of add that functionality for you. All right. Wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We see Jan from Cubase Index saying hi to myself, Jazz Dude, Agent K, and the Cubase family from Stockholm. All right, we see Roland Stuff joining from Sussex, England. All right, Tim is saying hi to Jazz Dude and Jan. All right, John Barry is sending season's greetings from South Devon, England. We have Jason Sykes joining from South Yorkshire, England. Thanks for being on. Always wonderful to see all of you. All right, we have Fly V joining from Winnipeg. Thanks for being online. Hope your new release is going well. All right, we have Rick France from Pacific Northwest just saying, hi Greg and all, Merry Christmas. Thank you for the season's greetings. All right, and we see Matt Elston joining. Says, so grateful for the streams. All right, we have Papa Vol joining from downtown Manhattan. And he says, yes, thanks for all the great streams from Papa Vol as well. Thank you for the kind words. All right, so we see Benny joining from Sweden. Anthony from Detroit, Michigan saying hello. Miss going to Detroit. Always enjoyed going there. Doing Club Cubase meetings at the Recording Institute of Detroit with Bob Dennis, senior engineer. All right, we have Uno Memento joining from Finland. Brian DeBear joining from Yuma, Arizona. All right, first question. I was looking at the nudge buttons on the toolbars, and the ones that nudge a range selection left and right doesn't seem to work properly. The keyboard shortcuts work, however. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let me just make sure my nudge, I'm going to turn it on here. Okay, I'll expand some of these. All right, so let's say I'm going to take my range selection here. All right, so now I'm going to nudge the range selection. So I have a range selected, so that range seems to nudge, and let me just kind of nudge the beginning part of this selection later in time, or the beginning part of the selection earlier in time. The end of the selection will extend or contract, make shorter. So those all seem to be kind of working as expected from the buttons. Keyboard shortcuts work. So let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are. So even if I have just no event selected and I have a range selection, I could come here and just kind of nudge my events kind of as expected. So let me know if I'm doing it differently than you are, but it seems to work. All right, so wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, where it's a bright sunny day, but cold winds are blowing there. So we see Papa Vol just says any remote support out there for Ableton Push 3 devices. I don't have one. I'd be happy to kind of show it if I had a unit, but I'm probably not going to purchase one out of my personal funds for that. But maybe if you have a particular question, someone else could ask or someone else could answer. But I don't have Ableton Push 3. All right, so we have Morris Jedi 6193 says, "Hey, checking in from Atlanta. Been using Cubase for many moons, and I would love to be able to find some help in finding or developing a template within Cubase for us machine users out there." I don't have a machine unit either, but if you want, if you send me like what you want for your particular template, I could probably help build that for you. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Flyv, who just asks, how should I balance my library with tracks and all one-shots and loops that are used? So if it is going to be like, I'm not sure if managing the library is like kind of managing, let's say the pool for the files. So let's say we'll do a new project here. All right, I'll just create empty. All right, so now when I do this, I'll just create it again, and we'll put this into, I'm going to specify the folder here. So we'll just say, okay, let's do December 16th folder. Okay, so as I come over here, we have our new template. So let's say if I have like a drum loop going on. All right, let me just check my audio routing here real quick. Sorry about that. Give you a quick preference. All right, so now let's come over. So let's say, all right, so let's say I have this as my one loop here. All right, and let's say, okay, from here, let's say I want to throw this kick on the downbeat, so we'll call this a one shot. So I'll make a copy of this. And let me just snap. So we're going to have a loop. Let's do kind of a one-shot sample. Now, as we do this and we look, there's going to be a preference if it's about kind of like more file management. So let's say if I come here to my preference and we'll go to editing to audio. At this point, when we import audio files, we can automatically copy the files to the project folder. Now, if I was, so let's say I have my little loop going on here, we'll just, and let's say I want to put in like, I want to add a drum track. Okay, so let's add a drum track, and now I want to take, let's say snare. Okay, so I will come over here, let's put in, let's say, a snare hit. On beats. Or I'll just do a pattern here. So we'll just get to our pattern editor. So I'm going to have one shot. I'm going to also just come over here and say, okay, on beats 2 and 4, I want my snare. All right, so now if we have kind of different samples, and let's add a sampler track. All right, and let's say we put in. So now when we go to our pool window, if we want, and you mentioned the library, which is kind of, we could store libraries, which are pool presets. But if we want to go to our media menu, we go to our pool window. Now we could just say, okay, I have my audio in the sampler track. So as we do this, we can see that these files may be, when we go to the path, kind of in different folders. Sometimes if you notice that the different samples are in different folders, you could right click in the pool and just select prepare archive, and now that will move all the samples that are being used in the project, in the drum machine, in the sampler track, all directly to the project folder for you. So, and you could also just access that directly from the media menu. Just come over here and just choose to prepare archive. That will kind of consolidate all of those for you. But let me know if that's what you wanted to see, Vince. Okay. So Chatfield jumped. Okay. All right, so we see Sue joining from Mojave, Arizona. Thanks for joining us today. K Creative Studios joining from Sweden. Constantine Official says, what do you feel is the best control surface for Cubase / Nuendo? So you could really, the absolute best one is one that's been discontinued for a while and still works on Windows, is the Nuage. That's obviously a very expensive control surface, but it would really depend on what you want the control surface to do. So I look at control surfaces kind of into two main camps. One is for mixing, where you want kind of tactile faders that feel really good. And also the other camp I would say is controllers that are designed for editing. So, there's a number of control surfaces that will have, faders that, are great for mixing, but it doesn't really translate when you want to drive the program for editing. Some popular control surfaces are on the market. The SSL controllers were kind of a more upscale controller. There's also the Icon series. You could also check out, for a single fader box, a lot of people like the Nectar. I think it's a Panorama CS12, I think is the model. And you could, one of the great things with Cubase is you could kind of stack multiple controllers at once. So, probably the Nectar is really probably better designed for editing. I really like, even though it's like a really cheesy controller in a lot of people's perceptions, but the Korg Nano control, because I didn't want to necessarily buy a new desk to accommodate a control surface, and it's like super small. And even though I have other controllers, I tend to grab my Nano control, frequently because it's so convenient. It's right above my keyboard. It sits between my computer keyboard and my MIDI controller, and it's about the size of, it's smaller than a keyboard controller. Also, a lot of people tend to like the soft tube controllers. A lot of people like those. We have one that's more for mixing and one that's for also more for editing tasks. So if you want to edit virtual instruments, having knobs and, to be able to kind of drive synthesizers, or if you want to do faders, for mixing primarily, then, lean more towards faders. But I think both the SSL and Softtube, have controllers that could accommodate both kind of editing and mixing, and make sure that it fits on your desk. Maybe I'm just thrifty with my money, but I like my desk and I want stuff to fit on my desk because I tend to find that my arms don't get any bigger, so stuff needs to be kind of within reach and accessible for me for controllers. All right, we see Bratman Studios says, hello, Greg. Welcome to Uptown Whittier. So many friends here that made this year. Glad to be part of the community. Looking forward to Zoom next Friday. So, yeah, it'll be this Friday, the 19th, I believe. All right, John Barry VU says, hi, Greg. The keyboard shortcut for scaling is not working on my Windows 11 system. How is it on Mac? So if it's, there's the keyboard shortcut is for the plug-in scaling. It may not be for kind of the overall interface scaling, but I'm pretty sure I've used it on my Windows machine, especially kind of during testing. But if we wanted to, I think I may have it set up. Let me just go to my MIDI remote here. All right, so and I think I may have it set up here so let's go ahead and just open up. So when I come over here, we can see that we'll have user interface scaling increase and user interface scaling decrease. So when I go to open up a plugin, and it's really good. The first plugin I think most people did this with was Frequency, just so we could. So just using the keyboard shortcuts to decrease or increase the size of the built-in plugins. So that's going to be for the built-in plugins. We can't really control the resizability of third-party plugins, but that particular function was intended for most of the VST plugins, and it may exclude Pad Shop and Retrolog. They'll probably be updated, but most of the plugins will work. So let me know if that's the scaling that you want it to see, John. But I've had that work in Mac and PC. All right, so we see Ayakrob 1011 says, I would love to have an automated tool to slice sample loops and save them directly as single samples. So there's a number of ways to approach this. One is, let's say if we have our sampler track here in the bottom and I wanted to drag this loop in, we could say slice. And then when we do that, we're going to turn this on, and now we could automatically just kind of slice the loops where we see so that way you could just slice directly there, and every one of those particular keys we could have kind of complete control over doing that. And so, that should do the trick. Now, another method that you could do if you wanted to split it on the project window is once we are here, we can say, okay, let's go to, so I'm going to double click here. Let's go to the hit points. in the sample editor. So we'll say, okay, let's get to hit points. And at this point, we're going to say, let's edit the hit points. And we can say, let's just create. And you'll see this little create tab here. And what we want to do is just say, okay, we're going to create, we could choose to create slices, a groove, markers, regions, events. So if I just say, let's create events. So now at each of the slices, it's automatically just created like separate events on our project window. So let me know if either of those would work, but it seems pretty automated overall. Let's see if I get my controller connected here real quick. Give me just a second. So there's a couple ways, and you could also do that also within Groove Agent. So let's say if we have Groove Agent SE that comes with Cubase. All right, and I wanted to take, I'll show it in the full Groove Agent here real quick. Be the same functionality. All right, so let's say if I add the instrument track Groove Agent here and drag this sample over so we have, but now what I'm going to do is just come over here, slice. We'll create slices, and now each of the slice is on its own pad that we could just trigger directly from there. So a couple of different approaches, depending how you want it to work, but I think you could, you know, automate the slices pretty easily, but let me know if that makes sense for you. Okay, so we just see from O Studio USA says, hey Greg, can you demonstrate the best way to add effects to an Atmos mix? Is it best to insert them on a track? You want an FX, or can you create an effects track as a send? I think we can do it as a send. Let's go ahead, just take a quick look. All right, let me just check my sample rate. Okay, so let's say we have okay, so let's say we just have an audio file. Now let's go ahead and get it ready for with our ADM authoring. So we'll come over here to our setup wizard. Okay, and let's set it to binaural. All right, so now if I take this guitar part, all right, so let's go ahead and add, we'll just make something obvious. We'll add an effect track, and let's make it maybe flanging. Okay, so I think that we want to set the configuration here. Let's try setting this to 714. We might have to do that for our effect track. Okay. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, I'm just going to do this as a send, or as an insert on this particular track here. So let's do a reverb on the track. Or as an insert. Alright, so now take just this reverb, so we're monitoring in binaural. So let me just put this into a quick loop. Hit Alt or Option plus B. Alright, now let's come over and see if we can add an effect track to that. We'll add a flanger. All right, so now we have our destination. And we could adjust kind of our panning. And I think with maybe our effects return, let's see if we send it to so now he's sending it to the bed. So now that we've routed that to the bed, we can come over here. Now we could just take our, have the flanging kind of only behind you. So when you add the effects track, send it to the bed. You want to make sure it's like a 714, and then just route it directly to the standard bed, and that's how you can get your effects going in kind of an Atmos mix as well. All right, so we see that Michael Teams is granted 1 gallon of Moose Tracks ice cream to Jan at Cubase Index. Okay, so we see Papa Vol just says maybe a further clarification from his earlier question about the nudging. He's just saying command right is nudge the content. All right, so when we come over, let's just go ahead and nudge our content. All right, so let's say if we have an event here that we could nudge that, let's go ahead and let's say if we have a range selected, we can move that. Now, since, if we just have the range selected within the event, it's still within the particular event, but we can still nudge the particular events, and I have probably a preference on for delete overlaps. So let me just check my editing preferences here. So if you go to editing, you could choose delete overlaps, but now you could just take a particular section here and nudge it over to the right and left. So let me know if that's not working for you. And we just see it says the manual implies that the buttons and keys are the same thing. So I don't think so. Let's come over here to this. We'll activate the nudge for this project. So as I come over here, it's going to nudge. We'll zoom in. So we'll nudge the tail back or extend. We can extend the beginning or trim the beginning. So it seems to kind of work. And I think, so if I do command right, that'll do those. If I do, and I think, but they seem to function the same for me. And I know there's keyboard shortcuts for nudging to start. Let me see if I can. So let's say if I want to nudge the start of this, that would be Option or Alt plus the right arrow or the left arrow for the end, and just Option to extend the beginning or ending, and Option or Alt plus Shift to trim the beginning. So to add data, just Option. To trim beginnings or ends, we want to use Option plus Shift. And just to move the events, it's just going to be Option or Command or Control plus the left and right arrows. So if I hold down Option, and we could see that Alt or Option, I could extend to the left earlier or later, and Alt or Option plus the Shift key, we can trim the start and beginning of the range. So let me know if that makes sense, but it seems like that's directly correlating as I move the events here. So if we extend, left arrow, right arrow, and if I, so that's with Alt or Option plus Shift, and we can see the keys moving there with the left and right arrows. And if I want to just nudge the particular events, it's just going to be Command or Control plus the left and right arrows. All right, so we see that Tim K is going to run off to the store but take the live stream with him. All right, so we see the SFC Records asks, why am I not able to update my licensed Cubase 12 Pro to 15 Pro? So yeah, you should be able to. So let's go ahead and take a look at the website here. So let's say, okay, we want to go to Steinberg.net, and we'll go to Cubase. And we'll say buy Cubase 15. So let's say, okay, I want to buy Cubase Pro. We'll just choose Pro here. And I want to do updates, upgrades. And we can say from Cubase Pro 11. So you can update from Cubase Pro 13, Pro 12. Or you could update from Pro 11 all the way down to Cubase 4. So you can just simply make sure that you go updates and upgrades, and then you can update from 13 and 12 to Cubase 14 or to Cubase 15 right there. So let me know if you're not seeing that, but you could definitely update from 12 to 15. All right, so you see Vince says, new release was awesome. I previewed lots and released the album all together today. Congratulations on your release. It's a big accomplishment. And we look forward to hearing many more releases from you in the future. Great job. All right, Michael Teams has granted Bratman Studio Rick 1 gallon of lemon meringue pie ice cream. And John Costigan has received, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, received 1 gallon of fresh Texas strawberry ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. So we see from Delcer Music, oh, Greg, are the reverbs in Cubase compatible with Atmos, or do I have to buy something like this 7 Heaven Pro? So you could definitely, any VST3 plugin can take advantage and be dropped into any different plugin format, regardless of channel width. It's part of the VST3 specifications. I think what the reverbs that are kind of more designed for Atmos, they may allow you to tweak the different reverb parameters on each of the channels independently. But, so that may be the difference. A lot of people may not need to have different reverb settings for each speaker. But as you just probably heard, if you had headphones on, when we had that guitar going through the reverb, that would be going in all of the channels for you. Okay. See Jazz Dude sharing a link with to a site with all the Cubase keyboard shortcuts, so it's good reference. All right, so we see from Braxel, great to see you on again. It says, hi everyone, why do all my studio connections in Cubase 15 Pro reset when switching interfaces? I then have to reconnect them one by one. When connecting it back, how do I stop that from happening? Well, if you switch interfaces and you don't have the same exact I/O configurations, then they could switch. So if you have like an interface that has 56 inputs and outputs, and then you switch to your stereo, your stereo in and out for a portable interface, and those 56 channels that have been defined for one interface aren't going to translate. What you can do is just simply, I think one thing that could help is when we go into your audio connections is just to, when you have like your outputs and inputs, is that you could just simply save preset configurations for each interface, so that you could just simply come right over here and say, okay, now I'm in my 8 in, 8 out rack mount interface. Now I have one preset for that, and save another preset for when I'm just need to be on my laptop with headphones, and save connections that way. But so we can't always guarantee that the same particular I/O configurations are available when switching different interfaces. So that's why you would reconfigure it. But that's why there's also presets. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, Roland Stuff is just asking, hi Greg, in Vari Audio, is the 0 to 100% pitch adjuster a strict cent scale, so we can adjust any note to within 1/100th of a tone? Today I couldn't get some notes precisely in tune, so I was constantly moving those notes up or down a semitone, and then using the 0 to 100% adjuster, but I couldn't get it exactly right. It was probably me. So let's say if we are doing some Vari Audio, I don't think it's necessarily tied specifically to cents, but maybe the percentage. But we'll take a quick look. go to other project here. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, so when we come over, here, I'll just close this. Okay, so we'll come over here to very audio. These might be fairly in tune, but let me just hold down the shift key here. So I think that as we adjust here, so let's go ahead and we could, let me just record a quick test tone and we will see. Bear with me just for a second. All right, so I'm going to record a test tone at, and turn this down. Now I'll say let's make it at 430. Knowing that 440 is going to be an A. Okay, so let's go ahead and just record. Okay. All right, don't think I got the recording. Let me try it one more time, sorry. Okay. All right, so we have a little bit of a test tone. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the test tone here. Okay, so we're 10 cents shy here. So let's say if we go up, right, so the percentage does look like how much it's going up in semitones. So we went from, let's say 430, and as we do that, so, but it looks like that percentage, so now if we take this up here, so that's going to be 100% change, but not necessarily a full semitone. So that's going to be kind of the percent that it needs to change to go to the nearest pitch, but not necessarily each percentage will not equate to a semitone, as you can see here. So we're going to go from 0%, and we're still kind of on A, but as we go closer, we can see that when we blow up the graphic here, that we could have this kind of like the actual event here. As we move it up, we'll kind of stop in the center, and that way we could do that. And that's going to move from 0 to 100%. So the 0 to 100% is how much it needs to go between those particular to get to the pitch, not an individual cent, or like, one particular cent frequency wise. So sorry, it took me a while to get there. Okay. All right, so we have a question from Soul Sound Official. It says, "Hi Greg, question: is there anything to use like Pro Tools channels like Heat or the mix head style?" So I think most of that is just going to be like if we go onto like the channel strip here. If you go to like your, we could, if you want it to be, I think that I'm not familiar with those. I've never run Pro Tools. But here you could have a magneto plugin. So this could be on input. So if you want to record, so that would probably be more like a tape saturation. And if Heat is more like tubes, you could just simply have the two plugins, and these could be on input channels. So every channel of audio that you record, you could just simply have those saturation plugins, and you could have them embedded, or you could just simply have the particular tracks that will play. And as we come over here, you could just open this up, turn off the oscillator. But as so if you wanted to on your input channels, you could just simply come over here and apply kind of tape saturation with no discernible latency. Or if you want it to be an alternate tape saturation or more of a tube saturation, you could just have those. So you could run it on the input source as it's being recorded, or you could just simply record it, have the audio file itself play through the source. So if you wanted to just process it afterwards or process on input. So if I import just a quick audio file, I'll do something that's a little more digital friendly here. And so we could hear it. So instead of putting on a actual analog recording, it was digitized. All right, so let's say we have so just on the channel strip, you have So we're going to turn that off. And let's do the tube. So Magneto's kind of special plug-in. It's the first analog tape plug-in ever released. And then if you wanted to just run those as plugins by themselves, if we come over under distortion, you can see kind of the Magneto settings here, or if you want to do under distortion also .tube, so kind of the same, but definitely check out the built-in Magneto 2. So it's a great plugin. Don't sleep on the included plugins. Okay. All right, so we see Studio USA says Greg can ask an Atmos question here. So yeah, go ahead, no problem. All right, we see Braxel's received 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream. Okay, I see Studio USA just says the Nectar controller is awesome. All right, so we see Suop. Sue's just asking, under Media, GoPro Media Player mode, does this work exclusively with GoPro? So it's not necessarily like, I don't think it's for the GoPro cameras, but once we do this, just see if it's under the media. Just see, reread the question here. And that's going to be for working with like 360-degree video is kind of what that is for. So let's see if it's maybe under Studio. It said GoPro VR. So that's for doing virtual reality stuff. So if you had like a, there's cameras that record 360-degree fields of vision. So you could have it so that as you do your panning for, we'll say, immersive or kind of spherical audio recordings, that you could match up the video so the video would move along with the audio recording right there. So that's meant for kind of 360-degree video, which GoPro has cameras that do that. Not all their cameras do. So, but if you have media that's in 360 degrees, like for video, then you could sync that and sync the panning with the video inside of Cubase. See, John Barry says he's using the Icon P1 Nano single fader controller, but also has touch buttons similar to Stream Deck, but also runs under Mackie control and a MIDI remote at the same time. And John Barry's received 1 gallon of chocolate cordial cherry ice cream. It's a good flavor. All right. All right, so we see John Barry says, Greg, that was for the whole program. My error, thanks for explanation. So, yeah. I think that once you kind of, if you want to do scaling for the entire program, used to be only available on Windows, but now if we go here to event, let's see if it's, but you could just simply do it for, is. Maybe under appearance. But yeah, so you could do it for the, and I think that a lot of times once you kind of set the scale resolution of your particular interface, that generally don't need it to constantly switch back and forth. Just having a brain cramp where the scaling is because I think they moved it. It used to be under general, and I think they moved it in 15. I think it's under user interface. For your application scaling. So, but yeah, the plugin command is designed for plugins because you may dynamically be changing plugins as you open them up. All right, so we see from Braxel, it just says all the external effects connects go to unconnected and I have to reconnect them one by one. Is there a way to fix it? So generally you don't have a way of saving presets for the external effects. I will mention that again to Steinberg. I've mentioned that omission for a long time. So, but yeah, currently that's how you have to do it. Sorry. See, Flyv says he has a techno controller, but I've assembled it for mixing through the years. All right, and Sue's just mentioning for his controller uses Touch OSC, expandable, mobile, cheap, easy to program. Okay, so we see from Ayakarab 1011 about the slicing. Says it's not about the slice, it's about saving. All right, so let's say so if you need to save the slices, I'll show you a quick tip with that. Okay, so let's say if we want to come here, so you say it's not about the slice, it's about saving. So if you wanted to save each of the individual slices, so let's come over here and export it. I can come right over here. So let's say, okay, we'll go to our sample editor. Let's go to our hit points. So I'm going to edit the hit points here. So let's say I have that. And now I've created the slices. Okay. And now what I want to do, let me just switch this to. All right, so now we have these individual slices. If you wanted to export those, where each of them, what you could do is I'll just come right over here as individual events. You could say File menu, Export Selected Events. And now when we export the selected events, each of these can be independent audio files on your system, not just a sliced audio file. So again, once you have kind of the slices made, if you want to turn those into independent audio files, come here to File, to Export, Selected Events. So obviously select the events first, and then you could do it with processing applied or not. You could do it as separate events, as one event, or block events. All right, so we see O Studio USA just saying awesome, thanks, Greg. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Not far from you, says, hey, Greg, number 43 on the like button. All right, so we see from Braxel some more discussion. It says the other interface he's using, he wants to switch back and forth his Fractal VP4. I wanted to practice some guitar, then go back to using my normal interface setup. And bam, all those 24 connections with external effects are unconnected. I have to reconnect them all one by one. Just out of curiosity, if you know, just why you don't just connect the Fractal to an input on your RME interface. It seems like then you wouldn't have to switch back and forth. And what's the benefit of you necessarily switching your audio interface to the Fractal? You know, if I was using like an external processor, I would probably just connect that directly into my audio interface. So, but maybe Braxel, if you could let us know if there's a particular reason that you want to use the Fractal as an audio interface, or if it's inconvenient to have it connected to your RME interface. See, Raw Justice Hip Hop just saying he's working on some training material, but he'll be back after he has his lunch. All right, Teddy McCready's, it's great to see you on. Says, hi, Greg, I just bought a new Mac, and I'll also be upgrading all my software, including upgrade to Cubase 15 Pro. My question is, how should I move all my songs and files over to the new Mac? So it can really depend on, like, if you were diligent with, like, your file organization, you could just simply, so most of the time when we look at projects, like when we start a project, we're asked for that project to be carried over. So we were asked when we start to create a project folder. So say, okay, we'll create a project folder for December 16th. So I do that. Any audio I record, everything will then be within that one particular project. And if you were set a unique folder for each of the projects, all you'd have to do is just simply copy those folders over to like a USB flash drive, an SD card, something along those lines, and then we take those particular files and drag them and just move the files. Now, as far as your Cubase settings are concerned, what I would do is just go to, so I would go to your edit menu and go to Profile Manager. And from your, on your old computer, you want to export your profile. On the new computer, take that same file, and this could be emailed or put on the same, USB drive or like a cloud-based storage system, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive. Export your profile from your old computer and import it into the new computer, and all your preferences, all your user presets will all be carried over. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer says, hello all, I'm really happy with the improvements to the workflow and improvements in Cubase 15 Pro. The hub redesign saved so much time. So it's great. It's something that's not necessarily always a sexy thing, having a hub, but we wanted to make it easier for new users to kind of get up to speed. All right, wonderful to see Terry Gray on from Minneapolis area. Hope you're well. All right, and Terry's received 1 gallon of Kahula mocha ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Just reading through comments. All right, Guame Busan just asked, after my upgrade to Cubase 15, added plugins and insert chains do not pop up immediately when dropped for being tweaked on the go. How can this be solved? All right, so it's just going to be a preference. So let's come over here. We'll add an audio track. So go to your preferences. So we'll go to preferences or settings, and you'll see this under plugins, I believe, where it says open effect editor after loading it. So I'm going to uncheck that. So now when I drop a plugin in, so let's say I put it as an insert, we'll come over here. We don't see the plugin automatically show up. So let's say, okay, I want to add this studio delay. It doesn't show up when I go to this particular preference again. And we say open effect editor after loading it. I hit apply, say okay. So now when we go to open that plugin, it now will automatically pop up the plugin so that you can edit. So again, preferences or settings. Under VST, select plugins and make sure that open effect editor after loading is checked. Okay, so we see that Tim K is back from the store. Let's see if he missed his ice cream. All right, wonderful to see Soren on from Sweden. Glad you can make it today. All right, Michael Teams saying hi to Tim K. It says he's given a 1 gallon of Neapolitan ice cream. All right, next question. It says, hi, Greg. Cubase Pro 14. Is there a way to transpose audio up or down to step guitars and vocals, etc.? So, yeah. Let's come over here. So, let's say I want to transpose. We'll do drum. We won't do drums, but we'll do guitars and bass here in this example. All right, so let me just adjust. So let's say we have our guitar and bass tracks here. So let's say as we're playing, I'm going to just select all of the events. And then on the info line, we'll see transpose. And you could just transpose here. And I could also send these tracks. So let's say I want to take these particular tracks. And if I want to send it to a group, so we'll make it a stereo group here. And let's say on that group, there's also a new transpose plug, a pitch shift plugin. So you can say, okay, let's get to my pitch shifter here. So I didn't select the drum track. So if I want to go up an octave, 2 octaves. So down 2 octaves. So you could use the plugin on a group or plugin on individual tracks, or just select the particular events and go to your info line and transpose. So give that a try. Let me know how that works for you. All right, so we see that Soren received 1 gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream. All right, so GMT 4192 says, how can I quickly create music and correct errors while playing with an Octapad is an easy way. So it could really depend on what errors that you're actually doing. So, but let's say if I have, let's see if this is gonna, for some reason, it's not liking so let's say if I wanted to come over here and let's say I add a groove agent instance and I was playing, let's say I was just kind of playing along with this. So let's say I was kind of playing along with this and maybe I was making mistakes. There is like an AQ. So let's say I'm playing along with this particular project and I'm going to set my quantize value here to 1/8 notes. So as I record, even though if I play kind of out of time, so I'm playing these snares and I'm purposely being a little early. Yeah, so I just go over here and I have like a false trigger or something. All right, so now when I play this back, since we had AQ turned on here, we can now, this will all be kind of perfectly quantized. So you can just simply automatically quantize on input. And a lot of people, when they're playing drums, it's a common thing to kind of fix any timing anomalies, just a real quick way of getting your drums. So try activating the AQ, the auto quantize, on the transport zone right there. All right, so we have Non-Delusional checking in from Newport, Rhode Island, wishing everyone happy holidays. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. See, Soren is apologizing for his typos to Michael Teams. I'm sure if we typed in Swedish, we would have a lot of typos. So, all right, great to see G-Nick on. He says, I've been using Magneto since the beginning and on every mix with Cubase. All right, so we see Archmedia Go Productions 9816 asks, can Core i5 handle Cubase 15? I think that there's people running i5 systems with it. You know, it's not going to give you like the most robust performance and doing like a 300 track soundtrack with orchestral processing and like really advanced synthesis, but you know, for playing back audio, I think that you'd be in good shape. Maybe other people that have an i5 that are using an i5 could chime in. All right, so Soren is just saying, is it not Zoom tonight? So we're going to do it. We're going to be doing our last live stream of the month on Friday, so the 19th. So I'm going to be probably one of the few people working late Friday night. But yeah, we'll be doing it on Friday. So not tonight, but Friday, the December 19th. That'll be the last live stream for the year. So we'll do our Zoom social then. Hope to see you on. All right, so Bratman Studio just bragging that it's 59 degrees in California, which is freezing for them. All right, so we see from Ricky Terra, just says feature request similar to Pro Tools, start Control S, Pro Tools search. So let's say if I'm here and let's say I have I'm looking for a kick drum, I could just hit Command F, and at that point, so let's say I do Command F, and then I could just type in like kick and select the track. There's also a little magnifying glass here, but just like Command F or Control F for find. So let's say, okay, I'm looking for a bass, and then you could select the tracks. Let me know if that's the type of search. All right, and next suggestion is to link playback and timeline locators sync. Okay. So let's say if I have like my left and right locators, if I just hit P, that will move the playhead position. But let's say if I come here and I hit Alt P, it will now automatically play that range selection. So if I have this event selected, I could hit Alt or Option plus P. And then if I wanted to loop and solo a particular section, I could hit Alt or Option plus Shift P. So if I wanted to set the locators there, I could hit P, Alt P to play that section, Alt or Option plus Shift plus P to solo and loop that particular selection. So, and another thing that you could do, there's a preference here. So let's say we go to, so if we go to your preferences or settings, I think it's under editing, where you could say that the cycle follows range selection. So if I come over here and I have a range selected, that my left and right locators will automatically adjust to the selected range. So if I just want to do that, so if I want to do that and then hit Alt P, I could just play that section or so let me know if those are kind of along the lines of linking playback with the timeline locators. See John Barry helping my brain cramped mind under user interface and the preferences for the application scaling. All right, wonderful to see Kerwin Young on. Says happy Tuesday after a tight semester. I'm finally able to catch up on here. Kerwin was, interestingly enough, teaching a hip-hop class, I think, at University of North Carolina. So it'd be a great class to take with Kerwin. And since he's back, we have 1 gallon of peppermint bark ice cream gifted by Michael Teams for Kerwin. All right, so we see John Barry just says, Greg, we have the whole program scaling on a keyboard shortcut, please. I'll pass it along, but I think that most people, once they kind of get a comfortable application scaling, tend not to go like I've found it once, and maybe it's just my personal workflow that, once I have kind of the resolution of Cubase that I like, and, I have my vision issues, but, I like, and this is usually the resolution I run Cubase. I run it at kind of a larger resolution on my studio computer, but, I find that this is really easy and comfortable to work with from like a distance on my monitor, and I can see a lot of information, but I tend not to constantly find a need personally to go back and forth. But we've had a couple of other people ask for it or kind of expect the application scaling, so I'll pass it along. But let me know if you feel like you're constantly switching back and forth. All right. Wonderful to see Gareth on from Spain joining us. All right, so we see Jazz Dude was searching for a signal flow diagram of Cubase, and there's none to really link it. Maybe someone at Steinberg can do the job. I remember Cubase 5 or so in the manual, there were some pictures. I mean, a lot of times the signal flow, when we go to like the channel view, we can see it's usually going left to right, and that will be kind of visually, that will kind of match the signal flow. But I'll see if I could dig up if there's any documentation. I'll take a look between now and Friday to see if I can find a signal flow diagram. See, Gareth has received 1 gallon of banana. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Banana ice cream. Okay, so it's 1 gallon of banana moon pie ice cream for him and his daughter Lola. Okay, so we see from Philip Coates 5523 asks, what is the easiest way to change a chord tone in, let's say, a C11 chord? Thanks, Philip. So let's say if we have, so I'm not sure if it's MIDI or audio that you want, but let's say if we have okay, so let's say if we come over here, let's just put in okay, so let's say if I had dragged this down, and we look at the chord here in our, so if it's like a MIDI note here, we could take any of the notes and so, any of the notes we can freely move independently if one is selected. Or, so let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. And if we wanted to like audition particular chords, we could say, okay, I want to, let's say if we're monitoring, so let's say we'll just send this to the Rhodes part, so only effect on that. All right. So, but if we wanted to like change the voicings for chords, we could also just kind of come over here. So let's say if you want to be able to adjust the voicing, so you can say, okay, I want to take that chord there, and so we could just do different inversions here. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking to do. All right, Del Sur Music asks, hello Greg, how do I customize Cubase so I only see what I need for mixing and not see stuff that is not related? Can I save it and have different scenarios? So let's say if we had a project here, I'll just open up one. So it could depend on what you want. There's different things of what you want to see or not. Let me just open up kind of a large project here, and I just want to see elements for mixing. Like I don't want to. All right, so let's say I'll just hit F3 and we could open up. So if we go to our mix console here, so if I don't want to see anything else, I could just save my project with just the mixer open. And if I save this project, I have my transport control here. I could jump to different markers. I can see my tracks. We can navigate very easily. So here we get, again, open up our different stuff. So let's save this as so we just save that as mix, and now when I want to, we'll close the project, and let's see if that will just, I believe it'll just open up in its state. So let's activate the project, and now, so then I'm only seeing the mixer. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. All right. All right, so we see from GNIC says, hey people, how can I slow the timing down without losing measures? Okay. All right, so let's say, let's go back to the other project here. All right, so right now, let's say we have all right, so what I could do is I'm going to just simply take all of my files here and make sure that, one, we're in musical mode. Now that we're in musical mode, let's go to like a tempo track. And now all you have to do is just simply, now that they're in tempo track, I'm going to activate the tempo track and just say, okay, I want to slow this down and speed it back up. So as we listen to this, and then we're going to have it just kind of start slow down here. I think I may have one track that's not in musical mode. And then we could have it speed back up. So once it's in musical mode, just simply, do a tempo change for the part that you want to slow down, and that should take care of it. All right, so Spacer 584 just saying hello, Greg. So thanks for joining us. All right, we see from GNick88 says I have a Latin tune I'm working on. I want to cut my playing speed in half. So yeah, just put it all down, and you could record it slow and then speed it up. It's a good trick. All right, so we see from GNick says I would like to retain the same tempo but change one track to play half time. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to do this in this scenario. So we'll come over here. I'll just revert this project here. All right, so let's say we're at like 100 beats a minute, and I have, let's find like maybe like a percussion loop of some kind. All right, so let's say we have this loop here. All right, it's incredibly stylistically inappropriate, but we'll come here. So let's say, okay, we're gonna have this loop, and this loop is now gonna play in time with all right, so I'm gonna make sure that these events here are not set to musical mode. So I'm going to come over here and turn musical mode off for those events. All right, so now those are still playing at their original tempo. So now I'm going to have this event in musical mode. I'm going to change my tempo from, let's say, 100 to 50 beats a minute. So the rest of the audio is going to kind of play back in time, but this particular event, if we keep this in musical mode and none of the other tracks, at that point we could just change the tempo and the tempo of those particular events as we adjust we can have that automatically play, have this one, only that particular one play back at the lower tempo. So, and if you're also working with loops, let's say, and if you're in, this came in 14 as well, another method to do this. So let's say I do this, I could listen to this at double time or half time. So when I go to import it, I could just import that loop at halftime as well. So if you import loops, you could have those loops, and let's say I wanted that to immediately follow at double time. I could now come over here and drop in the same loop at double time. So we listen to it. And now it's going to be playing at its original tempo. So, a couple tricks that you could try. All right, see kind words from Michael Team. Says, thanks, Greg, for everything you do for us. 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream for my family and myself. Sounds good. Thank you very much. So we see Vanessa Jazz P ask Greg, I get occasional screen whiteouts when using Cubase only. While using Cubase, any idea why that may happen? My system is a recent PC build running Windows 11 top specs for storage and RAM. So, usually if something is kind of going white, to me it would seem like maybe it's a display driver. So, a common video card is going to be an NVIDIA card with like a GPU, and they could have kind of like different settings, where you could have it run in studio mode or run it in more like for gaming mode. So I would say if it's turning white, I think it's studio mode that you want to be if you have kind of like a high performance video card. So sometimes the high performance video card can actually work against you, because we're trying to make the audio kind of more rock solid. But so I would, look there to see, if your display driver is where I would look. And you'd probably see other people having kind of similar issues as well. But try running the studio driver, something like that. All right, so we see Ricky Terra just says Pro Tools search could do global search in our DAW. Like you could search tool or options that you can't find. Yeah, so there's nothing like an equivalent inside of Cubase. I'll pass it along for a suggestion. There is currently something similar in Dorco. They call it jump mode, where you just hit J and it's kind of like a Google search within the program. So, but I'll pass that along, but there's no equivalent inside of Cubase for that currently. You see Ricky just saying in Pro Tools, locators are automatically sync with selection. I'm not sure if I would always want the locators to do that, but you could just simply hit the letter P to do it. So I think that is, kind of an easy way to do that. You could probably make a macro or, selecting it, but I may want to select an event. Like, let's say my left and right locators were playing around here. Let's say this is my left and right locator, and I want to select the event. I may not want the locators, like my loop points, to change. But if I did, then I could just hit the letter P. But I don't think they're there's an automatic way with just the object selection, and I'm not sure if I think I would personally find that annoying because it would change the play behavior, like maybe while I'm editing. So. Okay. You can see a nice discussion of a Boss guitar pedal board. Right. All right, so John Barry VU says, Greg, it is only when using something like expression maps when you have menus and submenus that they end up across two screens. Probably not an issue on a single screen. That is the reason for me. Cheers. Okay. Okay, I'll mention that to the team. Thanks for sharing that for the application scaling. You see Jazz Dude also recommending latency monitor for Vanessa's situation. It's a good suggestion. All right, so we see G-Nick just says I time stretch the MIDI part, and that, of course, makes the part play twice as long. Yeah, another thing, if it's MIDI data as opposed to audio, there's a couple other approaches. So let's say we just... see, it's going to like this. All right, so let me just put in a quick MIDI pattern here. Okay, so, if you didn't want to necessarily do time stretching, so I'm going to just say we have like this particular pattern playing here. And I'll just get this to lock. All right, so, and this kind of ties into a question we had later, but if you go like to a MIDI event, and let's get to our logical editor. So if I wanted that to play back like half the tempo, so we'll say we're going to take our type, we're going to transform, and you can also say type is equal to note, and we want to take the position, and we will say let's multiply, or we could just say divide by 2. And we also want to adjust the length. And we will divide by 2. All right, so now when we take this particular event, so we'll listen to it again. Okay, so let's go ahead and just So now I could just, okay, if I want to. So you could, speed up or, take. So let me just select all. I think I had certain notes selected. So now we could. So you could just do that, or as you came over, you could just say, okay, I want to take this. We could change our MIDI and go to sizing applies time stretch. And at this point, you could just, stretch this particular event out to double the time. So as we listen to it, or if you wanted to have the time, just grab the right edge here and time compressor. There's not going to be any artifacts when time compressing MIDI like that. Okay, so Gareth is just saying drag chord to MIDI track is revelation of the day. Okay, just reading through. Okay, Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see from Philip Coates, just says thank you, that is it. Glad to help. I'm trying to remember what your question was. All right. All right, so we see from all right, so we see Mikhalikov just saying hello from Sydney. Thanks for joining us from Sydney. It's one of my favorite places I visited. It's there about 20 years ago, 21 years ago, probably right about now, 21 years ago. Yeah, I think I got back on the 19th, so I was probably there exactly 21 years ago. Had a great time. So we see from Suop, it says, in your example for chord voicings, only one chord is active. The other chords are not for some reason. Faded out. Thanks. Okay, so let's jump back. Let me see if I have. Okay. All right. So Sue's question says in your example for chord voicings, only one chord is active and the other chords are not for some reason. All right. So when I'm doing this, because I could have different chord voicings for different chords. So let's say I want a root drop 2, but I want a different chord voicing for this chord. So this way I could just take each of the chords and have independent chord voicings from the chord track for each of these particular. So we could do that way. Each individual chord is kind of designed for independent voicings once the adaptive voicings are turned off. So I'm just reading your comment again. It says, in your example for chord voicings, only one chord is active, the other chords. And I think if we select multiple chords here, so let's say we select these, let's see if that changes it for all of the selected chords. Yeah, so we could change it individually for the chords. And that's when, and I think that if adaptive voicings is on, let's see if we can change multiple to the same, so that will kind of go and kind of do voicings for transitions between chords. All right, Braxel says, you give Greg ice cream, I'm giving Greg a full ribeye steak dinner with all the trimmings. Sounds good. Not a big steak guy, but I appreciate the gesture. All right, so we see from Vanessa, it just says, thanks, Greg. So thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so you see just a question. Greg, could you please show the best way to copy CC1, CC11 automation across several orchestral instruments? I saw that people manage them right from the project window, but mine are only inside the key editor. All right, so let's go we'll set up a scenario here. All right, so let me just add a couple instrument tracks here. All right, so I'm going to just have some notes. And let's copy that down. Okay. All right, so let's say we have all right, so let's say we go to all right, so let's just do it within the key editor here. So let's say we have CC1. All right, and let's say CC11. Okay, so we want to copy this. I think we could, let's see if I have this. Okay, so this is the one. All right, so let's say if we want to copy the CC data and paste it. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll just open this up. So let's say we come here and let's look at, let's say, in our, let me just bring this up a little bit. Okay, so let's say we have this CC data. Okay, so let's say I want to take that CC data, and I think that if we okay, and let me just see if we could, because I think that we could come over here. So let's see if we could have this automated. So let's see if we do a logical editor to copy the CC data. You know, to make it automated, so I could come here and just say copy data. Let's come here and Alt V. So let's say we want to paste at origin. Just so let's say we want to select all events in the lane, copy, come here, and paste at origin. So, but let's see if we could speed that up with kind of a macro. So let's see if we could select all of the particular CCs. So we'll say our subtype. We'll say it's modulation or subtype CC11, and let's just see if we, let's say copy. Don't want to do copy, let's just do select. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to save changes as preset, so we'll say copy CC1 and CC11. All right, and let me just come here. So let's say we copy, we select that, copy, and we want to basically go down here and let's do a paste at origin. Okay. All right, so I think we can make this work. Let's come over now. So let's make a macro here. So I can go to my key commands. So we'll say copy. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just to run that particular logical editor preset. Okay, and then I think that there's a next part. Okay, so let's add that command and let's just do a paste at origin. Okay, so I will come over here, and we could have that just be all CCs if we want it. But let's say if I come here, I'll have the top one selected. So we have this. And let me just see if we could. So it's kind of, let me just look for the one thing in the MIDI domain here in the key commands. Just look in the MIDI, but there is a way to kind of key command to get down to the next. All right, let me just try, see if I do this as a logical editor preset. I'll try a different approach on the macro. All right, let me try just one more. Maybe I didn't have the copy in. Okay, let me try this one more time, and then we take it. I'll take a different approach if this doesn't work. Okay, and take a different approach to that. So let me just. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. I think it's this step. I know that I'm just having a brain cramp on that particular one. So we're going to copy, and then we're going to nudge down. All right, let me see if this is doing what I want. Okay. All right, so if I run this macro, we can just now have all of the MIDI CC data pasted. So I know you want to do it if all the events are inside here. So as we look at it, we'll say, okay, let's come right over here and we look at our expression editor. So I think there's a way that to be able to do it in the editor, but if we have this set up here, I could run this macro. So we're going to process that logical editor preset, and I'll pop it up here in just a second. Copy, we're going to navigate down, so I'm going to select this particular event, and then we're going to paste those particular MIDI CCs. So now that I do this, I could just take that, and now all of the MIDI CCs will be identical between all of the different events. And again, just to show that process logic, that logical editor preset, and I know there's a way to do it. I'll spend some time with it maybe for Friday's live stream before we wrap up for the year. But just to do that, we could say we want to copy MIDI CC1 or 11, and if you wanted all CCs and not just 1 and 11, you could just leave this out. And one of the key conditions here under the Boolean conditions is to have this set to or as opposed to and that way we say we want to select controllers, modulation, and expression. So you probably wouldn't see event with those two because they're different controllers, so specify or. And then you could just run that particular macro there. So if we undo that, we look at that, so we see our CC data here, none there, none there. We look at the events. So now as I run this particular macro, it'll just go down and copy all of the CC data down. So sorry, it took me a while to get there. Let's see, John Barry says, Greg, I think there might be an option where the locators follow selection cheers, and yes, I did find it annoying. So let's see if there's a preference for that. Probably be in the same area under editing. And it could be a couple of different things. So you could have auto select under events and cursor. And if we have, so let's say if I have this a couple of times here. So if we have auto select events on cursor and I switch my transport mode to video files edit mode, yeah, but I don't remember a way of doing that. But let me know if it's important for you, Ricky Terra. All right, so wonderful to see Pablo on. We have a full Hot Mess contingent online today. Hope you're doing well. All right, we have a question. Should we expect integration of splice sounds to Cubase? So I think they already have like a VST plugin that a lot of people use for browsing. So we could, so there is some integration. It may not be at the same level as others, but I think they have a VST3 plugin that you could browse and listen to your tracks in time. Okay, John Barry VU says, hi again. I like the open all plugins on a track, but I cannot find any way to make a keyboard shortcut. Cheers, I tried to shift E, but it's a Windows shortcut to open a menu beginning with E. Yes, I don't think that there's a keyboard shortcut for that. There might be a way to, if you had to do it, there might be a way with the Project Logical editor to maybe do it. So let me just add an audio track and we'll throw on a couple of inserts. Okay, so let's see if we could select an insert slot. Okay, so let's say we want to yeah, I think that we might be able, let's see if we choose to transform. And if we come here, we get to track operation. We can say insert slot by number. Yeah, so I think that we could like enable, disable, but maybe not select. I was seeing if we could maybe select insert slot 1. So I think you might just have to hold down. It might have to be click on the edit key with the Alt or Option plus a Shift key to open those all up. So I don't think that we could set that from a keyboard shortcut, but I'll play around with it, see if I can come up with anything. All right. See, John Barry VU says, have we always had to sign into YouTube to hit the like button, or is this something new? So, all right, great to see Stefan checking in from Sweden. See, John Barry VU, John Barry just saying, cheers, Greg, I needed that copy controller data this week, so that's good. All right, so we see Michael Graybill just says hi and cheers from Dallas. Y'all thinking about a CC1 and CC11 things. A dream feature would be a CC link or a conform feature to draw simultaneously between multiple lanes for MIDI. It's a tricky thing because I think there's a lot of people that could accidentally draw in CC data to a different part that's not actually selected. So it'd be, I think that there could be a better way of doing it. But I think there's also kind of when you're doing it once, that every time you do it and you have, because we have a lot of people will have, their full MIDI score open in an editor. And when you select something, just to make sure you're not writing accidental CC information across 200 tracks in a project if you're looking at multiple events. So it seems like an easy thing, but there's kind of far-reaching consequences for unintended MIDI CC data that maybe is hard to envision. If you have like four tracks, like the example you used, versus 800 tracks, and you're looking at all of your data in the same folder, it could be a little more involved with that. But I'll discuss to see if we could get more, like an overall, like a cleaner solution. All right, great to see David M. on. He says, no Tuesday gig tonight. Now I can see what you get up to on Tuesdays. Great to see you on, David. Hope you're well. All right. All right, and David M., because you came on a Tuesday night, you have 1 gallon of chocolate almond ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, George Conte just says, I'm using an overly sensitive Apple Magic Mouse that keeps moving the timeline up and down with the slightest gestures. Is there a way to temporarily lock vertical scrolling in Cubase to prevent this? So let me just duplicate these tracks a bunch of times so we could have more vertical scrolling. So I've always found the solution to anything with the Apple Magic Mouse is to stop using the Apple Magic Mouse. It's one of my least favorite pieces of hardware. And you can see people. All right, so let's say if we're scrolling up and down constantly, so you want to disable that. I think that's going to be kind of a fundamental thing that's tied in to, let me just see if there's any, I don't know of preferences that could sort that out, but let me just try. Yeah, because we could turn off kind of like the functions in the mixer. Yeah, so I think that's going to be kind of fundamentally tied in to that. Keeps moving the timeline up and down with the slightest gestures. I would see if there's any, if there's any method to, perhaps if there's any settings for sensitivity inside the software. Many programs have issues with the Apple Magic Mouse. Let me disable another preference that I set. But yeah, there's, and you see it from video editors. So I think even if you got like a $9 Logitech mouse, that your whole editing experience may be improved with that. But let me just see if I don't think that there's a way to lock the scrolling. That I know of. I'll see if I could dig around some more, but I don't think that there is off the top of my head. All right. All right, Soul Sound Official just says, Greg, can you explain the gain structure of Cubase Engine, Greg, when sending signal to groups or buses? I know that VCA doesn't take signal but control it, and if two groups, it added 6 dB of signal. All right, so let's take a look. We'll just do kind of some signal flow here. All right, I'm going to I'm going to put an oscillator on a channel here. All right, and let's add a couple of group channels. All right, and I'll put this on, we'll add another audio track here. Okay, so we'll go to our mix console. All right, so I'm going to have, let's put an oscillator on, so test tone generator. All right, and we'll make this minus 6 dB. And I'm going to do the same thing on the next track. Okay, so right now we have our two tracks. All right, so we see that if we look at our mix console, we'll see we're at minus 6. So we have just kind of steady tone that's going here, and then this is being fed out to minus 6 dB. So I'm going to send both of these channels to the group. So I'm going to come here, let's do just the output routing. I'm going to say let's send both channels to group 1. So now when we come over here, we're going to send the routing to group 1. All right, so we see that we'll have, again, and we'll make this larger so it's a little easier to see. All right. All right, so now we're taking these two channels, and we can see that we're at, all right, so, and often when we do this, this could be because of pan law. So we're taking our two channels, everything is set at 0 dB. So as we do this, so let's say I want to send these both to, so we're summing both of these channels. But what I want to do now is I'm going to send these to our main outputs. So we'll come over here. So let's go to our stereo out for our audio tracks. All right, and let's take these two groups and I'm going to add a VCA. So the VCA doesn't do summing, but it will attenuate the signals. So we're going to add a VCA track to these. So let's say right now we see everything is kind of going to, just make sure we're, all right. So now when we adjust kind of our VCA, that's going to adjust the channels down, and we see how that's going to change. So let's say, when we do this, my VCA, it will attenuate straight down and we'll correlate between them. So as we come over, let's just go ahead and we see that we don't get a setting here. But as we are doing, we're summing two sources. So when we do this, now this could also be kind of contingent on the pan law too. So let's say we want to take one of the sources out. So we'll mute this track. And now we can see that because we're not, we take two sources and we could adjust our pan law by going into the project settings, into the project setup rather, and we could adjust kind of our pan laws. So let's say, okay, we want equal power so that when we double sources, that when we come over, so now we'll say equal power, because if we're taking two sources, we double the source, then we're going to have a 3 dB increase. So we're doubling the volume. So now we could come over here when we adjust the pan law, we could see that now as we adjust this, that our settings are going to be the same in the master fader. If we send both of these, now instead of going to, let's say, to the VCA, I also want to send it to the groups. Let's say I want to send it to group 1 via a send. So I'll go here to channel 1. We'll go to our sends, and we'll say, let's adjust. We want this going to group 1, and we want that to be at 0 dB. And I want this source to channel 2 with its groups, with its send, to go out to the group 1 at 0 dB again. So we can see that now that we're sending this, we see that we have -6, and if we come over here, so now that we're summing these, we're kind of doubling the signal, and with the pan law, you can see those changes. So again, if we come over to our pan law changes, let's go to the project setup, and if we say, let's go to our stereo pan law to -6 dB, that, as we add different sources, but we could see that as we add our different sources with the pan law, that could adjust. So if something doesn't seem right, it's often going to be like when you're summing. So now we could see that we're at -6 dB, that our signal source here, everything is, and as it's being summed with the folder, now this is going to be at 0 dB. So just be aware of the pan law settings as well, because that could be really critical. Okay. All right, we see Sable Winters on. Hope you're doing well. And she's received 1 gallon of chocolate peanut butter ice cream. All right, so we see John A. Walker just says eliminate hiss on a vocal. So if you're looking to eliminate hiss on a vocal, so sometimes if you're recording it, try not to record hiss. So if you're kind of having like a weird gain structure thing, situation where you have the gain too high and you're hearing hiss, you could do that. You could also assign like a noise gate. So let's go back to this project.
Chase away my fears. Together we can make this last forever.
So, if you have the choice of running like a noise gate, so a noise gate won't necessarily eliminate the hiss while the source is playing, but if we go into like the channel settings, you could just say, okay, I want to have a noise gate, and you can say at a certain threshold. So when it gets to a certain threshold,
don't let it go, make it last forever.
So as soon as it gets to a particular threshold, if there is hiss under there, we could set it so that you don't hear the hiss when it's isolated by itself. You can also go into like some different spectral editing programs, like if you have spectral layers. Often what we could do is just say, okay, I want to take this particular track. You get a spectral layers go version with Cubase, but if you have like even Spectral Layers Pro, you could now come over here, and as you double click, we could just kind of find like an isolated noise section here and say, okay, this is where we have hiss. And once you go to kind of the modules, you could just say, okay, I want to, denoise that, and you could select like that particular, you could register a particular noise and filter out that noise. But, that would be in the Spectral Layers Pro, and and that's like a separate sale, but that does, so much more than just kind of denoising functions as well. All right, Rick at Bratman Studio just says, when going from Cubase Pro 14 to Cubase Pro 15, is there a way to have all your custom settings to easily port over, like external synths and other stuff, plugins? So the plugins are going to be, so it's kind of outside of Cubase. So if your plugins are installed, they will automatically port over, but Cubase won't necessarily take your actual plugins and migrate that. So you would have to make sure that the plugins are installed on your system. But if we have your own custom presets for plugins, third-party plugins, those can all be saved if we go over here to your edit menu to the profile manager and export your profile from your old machine and import that. And some information will be carried over that way. Most of the information that you ask for would be carried over. Some things are going to be like project based, and something that would be project based would be along the lines of the project colors. So the colors for a particular project kind of live with the project and not independently of the project. So colors won't transfer over, but just about everything else you mentioned, but not third-party plugins, but the settings and your presets for third-party plugins will be migrated over with your profile. All right, David M. is happy to see Sable Winters on. All right, Contrast Power 6302 says, it seems we can only create shared copies of events selected with the object tool, but not with the range tool. Is this true? All right, let's take a look. So I think it's, shared events, not necessarily a shared range. So let's... All right, so I'm going to duplicate this. All right, so if I do Command D or Control D, that will duplicate. Let me see if I do. All right, let me just... Yeah, so I think it's going to be kind of event-based. But let's see, once we have our event in here, if we hold down Shift, we could do that. But let's see if I try holding down my Shift key. Yeah, so I think it's going to be like the event is duplicated, but not the range. So I think so if we came over here and we split this particular event, then if I hold down Shift and drag across, then that would be duplicated. But it needs to be kind of the event itself that's duplicated. as the origin of that. All right, so we see from Soren, says, Greg, just to get some suggestion that I can practice later. If I've recorded audio stems that are crazy in gain, I need to gain stage before mixing. How do you suggest I do that with the 46 stems? Okay, so if I had a bunch of, you don't necessarily have to gain stage so much before mixing. If you do need to, this is when a lot of people would go through, so let's say if I have a new project here, right, and let's say you said 48 tracks. Okay, so let's say we're just going to add a bunch of tracks here. Okay, so if I was in my mixer and I wanted to do gain staging, and I wanted to kind of do gain staging before mixing, I would come over here and, we go to the sections and I would say, okay, let's look at the pre-section. And once we come over here, you have the gain control. So I would have, before I did like a lot of mixing, let me just hide my input channels. And you wanted to gain stage kind of, to get your gain stage kind of set up, I would just go to the pre-section in the mixer and just adjust the gain right here. So even if you just kind of hover over, if you have like an AI knob controller, you could just easily kind of pop over here and just kind of do your gain staging from the pre-section. So this way we could, get kind of roughly all the same gain before we touch the faders. So if something is, 15 dB too soft and 6 dB too loud, we could just come right over here at the gain stage and just be able to adjust these down just to kind of get started before even touching a single fader. So everything's kind of closer to being in the ballpark before you actually start mixing if you needed to. All right, great to see Graham Witcher on from Oxford. He's received 1 gallon of chocolate eclair ice cream. All right, David M. is happy to see Kerwin on. Okay, sorry. Right, reading through comments. Right, Pablo is saying he needs to experiment more with Spectral Layers Pro. All right, so we see a question from Soren. Says, Greg just asked something related to this hangout. Some singers get worn out with vocals during tours. Do you do something special to keep your voice fit? 4 hours of talking twice a week will wear it. So I don't do anything special. I playing in bands for years. I totally understand the whole singer thing, and how important it is to preserve your voice. And I think it could be, I try to find kind of the right balance where I don't try to talk too loud for 4 hours. I don't do anything special. I try not to drink, I try not to drink water before, and it's probably doesn't help. because I don't want to have to take a bathroom break during the 4 hours, but I really don't do anything special. I keep the microphone pretty close that you probably hear, and I have like a little an Audio Technica where like a headset mic where I can move around and I don't have to always lean in on a microphone. So wherever I kind of move my head, the microphone is right in front of me, but I don't do any special vocal warm-ups. I'm not probably, flexing my muscles as hard as a singer would. And I know how delicate that can be, of an instrument and a muscle, playing with singers for years. And, I had a friend that was in a big band whose singer, their vocalist, had problems, and be like, and everything is so contingent upon that. And the running joke was they'd hear a cough and it's like, oh, tour's off, So it's, people's whole careers can be based on how they preserve their voice. I know some singers will do a lot of work and vocal warm-ups beforehand. I don't really do anything special, but I'm not screaming and singing. It's probably like walking for 4 hours versus doing a marathon and running for 4 hours, but I don't really do anything special. Usually as soon as I'm done, I'll, make sure I get some water to hydrate, but I usually drink a lot of water throughout, generally I drink a lot of water throughout the day. So Brexel is just saying Santa is number 1 this season. All right, Soul Sound Official asks, question, can you demonstrate how to count samples in the project? A track with no inserts and duplicate it with a plugin with latency, how to count samples and put a marker where it lands to do a null test. All right, so generally, when audio is playing back in Cubase, it will automatically compensate for the latency. So if you had a plug-in chain that, caused 83 milliseconds of latency, when you play that audio file back, it would, simply play that track ahead 83 milliseconds so that with that plug-in processing chain, that it is automatically in time. Now, if you want to know what the latency is of your particular system, there is a cool function inside of Cubase. So let's say if I come over here and I have like a vocal chain, I have a reverb, like a convolution reverb, and we wanted to have let's say frequency, and let's do a multi-band compressor. So sometimes it could be hard to get a sense of, what exactly the latency is on each plugin. So if you go to the settings, and we could do this in the mix console or directly in the inspector, like the channel inspector, that when we come over here, you can see setup sections. So when you come, let's say, okay, I click on a section head here, and one of the sections that you see is the latency. So check that. So I can see that with all these plugins I put in, they have 370.9 milliseconds. So, and if I click on the little arrow here, we could see exactly how much latency in samples in milliseconds each of the plugins is taking. So sometimes heavier plugins will take more processing. So plugins that have to look ahead for like multi-band compressors, those can be a little higher latency, and you could think of the latency of the plugin as kind of like the tax for running that plugin. Like, okay, it sounds great at the end, but it's going to kind of jack my latency up. So if you had to kind of find a number, I would just simply come right over here and look at the latency figure. And if we're in kind of the mix console, we could go to setup sections, and again you can see the channel latency, activate it right there, And that way, as you're doing a mix, you can see exactly how much latency is on each channel. And then once you click there, it could break it down by plugin. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Soul Sound Official. All right, so we see from Soul Sound Official, it says, saw a Mixbus TV doing it when testing a plugin by printing the second track with the plugin, and then put a marker to do the null test when the saturation plugin or so. All right, so let's just take a look. So let's say if I drop, we'll come over, let's do like a, we'll just do like a multi-band compressor here. All right, we'll do a quick test here. See if I have. Okay, so let's say I am processing this with a preset on a plugin here. Okay, so let me just open up quick preset. Okay, so let's say we're all right, so now let's go ahead and let's render. We'll get to our render settings and we'll make sure that we do our channel settings, which would include this insert. Okay. So if I don't have it selected, that would be helpful. Let me just come here. And we'll render in place one more time. Okay, and let's unmute this. All right, so let's put this in a quick. And we can see, so some plugins may introduce some, if I put this in like, you know, but, you know, some plugins are going to have, you know, like different linearities, but you can see that the vast majority of that canceled out just by doing that. So it's usually not an issue, you know, because the latency compensation that's being done, but some plugins are mimicking analog, can have some randomness thrown in. But for the most part, you don't really have to worry about it. All right, Mariano Yanez Podoroska asks, can you have lanes on instrument MIDI track or just rack? Thank you. Okay. So let's come over here. Let's just add an instrument track. All right, so let's put this in. All right, so we'll put this on record. So I'm going to go to my MIDI here, and then we could just say, I'm just going to put this into stacked mode. I'll put this into cycled recording here. So as I... All right, so now I did kind of a cycled recording, and when we come over here, let's just open up the lanes. and then we could see that we could have the lanes just like we did before. So if I didn't want to have those muted, I can now listen to my lovely 21st century composition here. So then each pass can be put onto its own lane, but you probably just need to adjust the MIDI record options. So you could do it stacked no mute, which is kind of the end result here, or stacked. And you could also set this in, if you get to transport, and you'll see like your MIDI record modes. So you can adjust your MIDI record modes right there. Okay. See, David M just says, Gareth, what's your new name? I can't see it. I know you're on here somewhere. So it's the Gark. So Garck. All right, John Barry U just says, hi Greg, I want to set up an effects return master bus. So Cubase only allows effects to be sent to stereo or to another effects. So I created another effects, but with nothing inserted, then routed all effects to this, solved. Yeah, so when we think of the master bus, you know, like this will be kind of the end of the chain here, so that, you know, we can't, you know, everything is being collected right here generally, so on the outputs. So we can't necessarily take the output and then feed it back to like an effects send. So what a lot of people will do in that case, if we have like lots of tracks, is send all the tracks to kind of like a pre-master group. So let's say if I come here, we can say, okay, I want to take like all of my tracks into projects. I'm going to take all of these tracks here, and instead of sending them to a, you know, directly to a group, I'm going to add a group track here, and we'll make it a stereo group. So then we have our group, and we'll call this our like pre-master group. So I'm going to select all my channels, send it out. So I'll hold down my Alt or Option plus my Shift key. So now all the tracks are being routed out to the group. So, and then everything gets routed out to the group track. And if we need to send this to another destination, the group track has sends because it's not the end of the line. So, but we can think of the master output as being the end of the line there. All right. All right, so Pablo just saying, can I soften the S sounds a bit with Spectral Pro, or is it too destructive? So, you know, one of the great things that you could do with Spectral Pro is, you know, let's say if we go to a particular vocal here, you know, if you kind of know where the frequencies are, so let's say, okay, I want to come, and we know that like these are kind of our sibilant frequencies, and you could choose just to kind of do like, you know, rectangular selection. So you can say, and while you listen, you know, we could just have, so we'll turn this up just a little bit. So let's just audition.
remember you.
All right, so let's say I just wanted, like, let's say. All right, so now we could just kind of audition what's in this selection. So let's say, okay, we want to audition here. So let's say we've isolated that particular frequency range. Then what we could do is just come over here and you can make a new layer from that and then just bring that particular layer down. So that way you could just isolate the sibilant frequencies and bring it down. And that could be, a great use of kind of like forensic, we'll call it like forensic de-essing if you needed more control over it than what a typical plugin offers. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says I need a 75% off sale and Spectre Layers 12. That'd be a great Xmas present. So I think there was just the Spectre Layers was on sale, just ended last week, like a week ago Monday. So, yeah, I need a 75% off sale on my house too, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, always look for different, there's generally promotions constantly going on. All right, so Gareth just saying important for vocalists to drink a lot of water and keep hydrated. All right, so we see Mr. John A. Walker just says, thanks, Greg. Michael Teams just says, the hardest thing a vocalist is a whispered vocal. Can really tear up your vocal cords. All right, so we see Michael Pierce as the button man who's made it. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Pablo's looking for some soup from Michael Pierce. All right, Michael Teams has granted Michael Pierce 1 gallon of cordial cherry chocolate ice cream. Okay, read through comments. Okay, sorry, still reading through comments and just had my chat jump on me. See, it's bad weather in Spain currently. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, Greg, what is that red line at the very bottom of the screen next to the MIDI gauge? It's always bouncing. I'd click on it and it would go away, then come back. Is that important? So it could be just, let's see, as we're playing, let's see if we could find it. Let me just move. So maybe it's the audio clipping, perhaps. So let's say if I go to my mix console and let's say I over distort. I'll take the automation off here. So it could be just maybe like a clipping signal. Let me just add some more gain and see if I could create it. Yeah, so it might just be audio clipping if it's like right here. So it's probably related to the signal meter. So let me know if that's the area that you're looking at, Rick, but it could be just maybe like audio that's clipping that's causing that. And there's also, like, you may notice that I have like this, it's not a red line, but right here, like I have a CC121 controller. So as I move, and there's just, you know, some companies, Yamaha and I think Roland both do this. They have what they call like MIDI active sensing. So it's basically just like a MIDI message that will pop out and just say, hey, I'm here. It's like a MIDI handshake, if you will, just saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. You know, just in case you forgot me, I'm here. So it doesn't actually send a message, but it will register on the MIDI activity. So if I turn off my CC121, I'll just turn it off here quickly. We'll see if those little spikes will go away. So now it's off. Don't really see MIDI activity. If I turn it on, even though it's not doing anything, it's transmitting MIDI active. So now it's on, and now it's translating the active sensing information. Okay. All right, so Soul Sound Official says, on the same topic, I just want to use the top tools to count the gap when analog emulated plugin on how to count the samples, but first track should not have plugins, only the second and printed. So if you're looking at kind of like two different sources, let me see if I still have that file open. Yeah. All right, so what you could do is say, okay, like let's say these were ever so slightly off. If we zoom in, let's set our master time here to seconds or samples. So let's say if you notice kind of like, oh, this one is coming in a little bit before, if we just kind of select like that range, I'm going to take my snap off. So you can hit the letter J and you can say, oh, it's this much time between those. So let's say, okay, when I go here, you know, like let's say that's our gap. At this point, we could say, okay, we could see the range start and range end, and then we could actually see the range length. So here we can say, okay, like from here to here, that's, you know, 88 samples. So if you are measuring that gap, you could select it with the range tool, switch your master time, and if it's in seconds, you know, we can say, okay, that's 2 milliseconds. But if we switch our main time here to samples, and we say, okay, you know, this is the timing discrepancy between the two sources with the plugins, then you can see the range length and see the amount of samples or seconds or time code or bars and beats. So then you could determine how many samples of an offset there is manually between two events. All right, so you see Soren just says, Greg, this Omni Vocal Beta, I wish you would have inside information to share about its future. Does it go out of beta to an add-on product to Cubase like VST Connect Pro? So just today, I got an email from at the NAMM show. I'll be having a meeting with someone kind of from the Omnivocal team at Yamaha. So probably at the NAMM show, which is going to be like 5 weeks from now, I would probably have more information and more insights as to kind of the future development and direction. So we'll see, so I will be kind of meeting with some of the people from Yamaha in Japan to go over, I think, those topics. So I may have a better answer like after the NAMM show. I'll see if I get any more information before, but I don't think I will. All right. So we see from Soul Sound Official, can you show how in Cubase with the selection tool in a project count samples kind of offline without Cubase auto compensation? So yeah, let me know if this works. If you're like, okay, like this is starting here, we can see that is 17 samples. So, and you probably asked that right before I showed it, but just in case. All right, Michael Teams is reminding Michael Pierce that the Zoom will be on this upcoming Friday. All right, so you see Michael Pierce says he may be a little late to the Zoom. All right. All right, so we see from Pablo says I'll try that way, Greg. All right. So we see Sable Winters says, anyone have suggestions on a packable audio interface other than a Focusrite 2i2 for traveling on PC? Check out the, there's the Steinberg hardware is kind of being rebranded as Yamaha, but they have what they call an IXO 22 that you can probably still get. That's super small and very backpack friendly and light. Sounds great. See, Pablo wants more groove expansions on sale. He says he wants more. All right, so we see from John Barry, he says, hi Greg, I'm really new to the score editor. Can I show articulations from a self-made expression map? I have a bass guitar map with slap articulations, for example. So yeah, you can. Let's see, may I have an example here I could show you. All right, so let's say if I want to come over here, all right, so let's come over here. All right, so when I come directly over here to, so I think that once we have this, let's go to the score editor, so I think if we go to, I may have a brain cramp, but let's see if we get to the score settings and interpretation, that you could just say, okay, we want to show the MIDI events, and we show the techniques, the symbols, and then when we actually go into so at this point, I think if we go to your articulations, we can say, okay, let's do a fall bend on that particular note. So let's come over. So let's say if I want to put it in a different articulation here, we could just say, okay, let's make this adult bend up. And then, but you can just kind of put the articulations in there. And I think if we come back to the score editor, let's see if we come over. So I think that when we, so then you could just kind of add them in, and if the expression map has that particular articulation associated with it, then that could automatically be added in the score editor. Okay. So Pablo is asking, when will Groove Agent 6 take long to come out? And Pablo's already answered with my standard reply, so when it's ready. So I'm sure there's people that are working on it pretty regularly and constantly. So, all right. So we see Estate Q collaborators. Says, hi Greg, Josh from Raleigh here. I'm trying to use my WaveLab elements after quite a while. I am not being recognized. My activation code is not working. Re-download with updates is failing. So let me know which version that you're running. So it was 11.2 that had switched from the e-licenser licensing model to the Steinberg licensing, which is kind of an account-based system. So if you have like WaveLab Elements 10, the e-licenser server is shut down, maybe 7 months ago. Or 8 months ago now, so you may not be able to activate a 10 version. But if you have like 11 and higher, if you have 11 or 12, then you're going to be able to activate that with the new Steinberg licensing. And you may just have to go into, and if it's like 11, or 11.2 or higher, when we go to you'll see your Steinberg activation manager. So when you come over here and just see, so once it's kind of in your account, if it's on a new system, you may just have to come over here and choose to activate your particular license for that to actually kind of kick in. So, but if you could let us know which particular version of WaveLab it is, because there was a licensing change a few years ago with that. So we see the contact Steinberg in chat keeps disconnecting after a third time retyping message. Yeah, so let us know, what version it is. But there's always, if you're based in the U.S., if you're in Raleigh, there is a, phone support that you could call during the day. So, but yeah, let us know what version. That would be helpful. All right, so we have a Michael Pierce soup recipe: pearl barley broth, saute onion and carrots, garlic, rosemary, chili flakes, and veggie stock, and pearl barley. Simmer for 45 minutes. Trimmed kale leaves, simmer, season, and serve with olive oil plus drizzle and Parmesan. Nice recipe. I'm going to try that out this week. All right. Wonderful to see Mark Rabin checking in from Montana. Everyone give a big woof to Mark Rabin's dog, Stella. Let's see. Barack Agency just says shine on your crazy diamond sax solo. So yeah, it's one of the built-in Hallian sonic saxophones, if you haven't explored that. All right. All right. Marin Subisic says, hi, Greg. Since we're in the score editor, is a possibility to get the Segno or Coda signs bigger? All right, so let's take a look. All right, let me just... That might be under the repeat structures. All right, so let me just... All right, so let's say if we come over here, we drop the coda in. All right, so let me see if it may be kind of fixed size. I think it's going to be kind of a fixed size. If you're in Dorco, we could, have, like if you go into the engraving options, but I think it's going to be kind of a fixed size for those particular items, since there's not like engraving options. But let me just take a look. Let's see if we go into our notation options. Yeah, I think that they might be fixed size in Cubase. Let me just take a look at some of the other options here. Yeah, so the full Dorco, you can have like engraving options where you could get like totally very detailed. don't think it's going to be under instrument settings. Yeah, so I'll see if I could take a look for it, but I think it's going to be kind of fixed in size with that. Sorry about that. Okay. So Mark Rabin says, so I've been through a massive catastrophic crash on Windows 11 Home, and I'm back with Cubase 15 Pro again with SSL2 Plus and 32 gigs of RAM on an old MSI laptop. Was an endeavor, but I learned tons. Yeah, so it's not the best thing to learn right before the holidays and stuff. But sorry you went through that. Hopefully your system is back up and running. It's never fun. All right, and to commiserate, Michael Teams has granted Mark Rabin 1 gallon of key lime pie ice cream. All right, so we see from Josh, I believe it says it was WaveLab Elements 10, but thought I'd handled it. So if you're on an e-licenser, you could still, if it's on a physical e-licenser, you could still connect the USB e-licenser directly to the computer. And once that e-licenser has been authorized, if it is a soft e-license, you could upgrade to WaveLab Elements like 12, the current version. So, and we could check that. But the server that did the license activations is no longer like online. But let's say if we come over here, let's get to WaveLab, and let's say you want to buy WaveLab Elements. We can say you want to update from 10. It's going to be $39. So it's not hateful to jump up if you had to, but that way you could just simply upgrade your WaveLab Elements 10 to be on the new, most current version. So it's only $39 for that. So, but yeah, there isn't going to be a way to reactivate the license currently. So. Okay, so we see Mark Raven says, so this is one of the things we learned. If you use Groove Agent 5, turn it off before closing projects in Cubase 15 Pro. It does not release the handle well in Cubase 15 Pro. Okay, I'll play around with that and pass it on. All right, so we see Sable is checking out the IXO22, so it's a great light interface. Check it out. So we see Mark Rabin in Montana is due for 90-mile-per-hour winds. Entire Colorado Front Range is getting turned off tomorrow. So I hope you stay safe and warm. See, Graham Witchers is saying they might be expecting snow in the UK. So yeah, we had snow here Sunday morning, but luckily it didn't affect our concert. My orchestra concert I did. All right, so we see Soul Sound Official says, thanks, Greg. That helps from the info bar. So yeah. All right. Okay, Brian Sawyer, as Brian DeBear asked, forget how to get to transport to return to where you stop. Okay, so if we go, it used to be a preference that people couldn't find, and then we moved it to an obvious place, to the transport menu. And when we come over here, we would just say the start mode, and we say return to start position on stop. So now if you play and we stop, it'll go right to the start position. And if we go to our transport and we say start mode, if we uncheck that, when I stop, it'll stop in place and continue on. So we could just come right there. Okay. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Brian. All right. So we see from Soul Sound Official just says, is there a way to count samples width while keeping beats and bars to not lose the grid? So once you kind of change, once you change the, what I would do. So, if you have your bars and beats, you have two different time. You have a primary and secondary time display. So if we see kind of our primary time display here, often indicated, and if we kind of hide that there, so I'm going to extend this over. So right now I can see my primary time display is going to be set to bars and beats, and then I have this set to seconds, but I'm going to change this to samples. So now if we just hit the period key on above your space bar on your QWERTY computer keyboard, you could just toggle back and forth between your primary and secondary. So if you're like, okay, I want everything to snap, to this particular, so I may do kind of edits here, and then when I need to work in samples, you could just toggle back and forth between the primary and secondary time display formats. So give that a try, but it's going to snap. When we do nudging, like if you wanted to nudge a particular event, the nudging could be a bit different. So as soon as we do, let me just find an audio event here. So, if we're doing nudging, we could just say, okay, I'm going to come over here, and we could choose to nudge and not link to grid. So when we come over here, let's go to samples. So now if I wanted to say, okay, I want to nudge by 10 samples, as I nudge, I'm not nudging based on the actual time format. What I'm doing is I'm, on a primary time, I'm nudging based on the secondary or an alternate time. But when we're moving events, it will snap to the primary time display. But again, you can just simply toggle back and forth between them. All right, so we see from Marin, just says, thank you. There's also not a way to decide how many bars you want to see per staff. So it could really depend, like when you're doing notation. So let's say if I want to come over here, we go to our notation example. Like if we have all whole notes, we may see more measures. But if I had another passage here that was let's say a bunch of 16th notes, I could come right over here and just say, like as we're putting in notes, let's say, okay, let's put these on. That it's really kind of dependent upon the material. So, if we have like a whole bunch of 16th notes, that would affect how many staves per system they're going. So it tries to automatically make it very legible for you so that as you are reading, that it's easy to kind of read through all of the different music for you. So it's not always going to be necessarily, like 4 bars may not make sense overall compared to, adapting to the musical context. All right. Okay, let's get to the next question. Okay. All right, so we see a question from Wanian. It says, can we replace the stem separation feature with spectral layers 12? It sounds better. So currently, what I was told, kind of for technical reasons, that level of integration currently isn't available within spectral layers. So, maybe we'll be able to do it in the future, but with the current offerings, like the technical handling of doing that within the Cubase environment wasn't available. But if you have Spectral Layers 12 Pro, you could still run it as an ARA. But for people that don't have the financial means to do that or need to use the feature casually, there's the built-in stem separation. So maybe in the future we'll see more kind of technology convergence between the two. But currently it's going to be 2 separate things. All right, so seeing Mark Raven says with the Groove Agent 5 and Cubase 15 Pro, so I'll check it out. But if you want to send me some more information what you found, I'd be happy to kind of dig more into it. See, Brian just says, no wonder he couldn't find a return to start position. Should never put stuff where it's obvious. Yeah. All right, so we see from Josh says, thanks, Greg, found the dongle for Wavelab Elements 10 for upgrade price. So if you have the dongle with the Wavelab Elements, you should be able to just install the program, connect the dongle. And that, if you have the license on the USB e-licenser, then you're set. You don't have to reactivate it, just simply install, and then it'll look for the license on the USB e-licenser, and then you should be able to get up and running, so you don't have to do any activation or reactivation. Okay. Let's see. Michael Pierce just saying, I guess he had a bad experience with some earlier SSL hardware, but I think it was kind of SIDAC hardware that SSL had taken over. Mark Brugler just says, I'm still laughing at Greg's comment the other day that he makes a living off people not reading the manual. He says that would be me. So well, thanks for keeping me employed all these years. I've had a good career. All right, I know we had a couple questions that were mailed in. Okay. All right, so I saw another question just rolled in. It says, question, hi, is there a way to back up and transfer to my new Mac all the plugin assignments I've created for my MIDI devices? So, for if it's, so all the assignments put in for my MIDI devices. So for the MIDI remote, all you'd have to do is come over here. So if it's for this MIDI device, the assignments, what you could do is if you just come over here to the settings, go to scripts, and now if you need to export your script, you can just simply, you could import and export scripts right from here. So you could just simply export the scripts and email the file. A lot of other things will just be carried over in the particular profiles. All right, so we see Contrast Power 6302 just says a question, can we expect some kind of rack in the future from Steinberg? So if it's like a rack piece of hardware, like an audio interface, so I think, what we had been doing for a number of years was Steinberg was the brand that audio interfaces were manufactured. So we worked on them in conjunction with Yamaha, our parent company. And now I think the direction that they're taking as of this year, earlier this summer, is that the hardware will be Yamaha branded, since it's actually manufactured and distributed, and most of the marketing was done by Yamaha, and that Steinberg is concentrating on software. So we'll still have many of the same options available, just under a Yamaha brand. All right. So we see, says, yes, I've done that script. What I meant is I created custom scripts for my MIDI controllers, but the plugin assignments for each plugin, is that possible? So, those would be carried, so like where you've done, so if we come over here, we'll just, so let's say if we have a plugin and we're here and we've done like the routing here for like the quick controls, I believe that would automatically be carried over with your preferences in the profile for you. All right. All right, so we have from Soul Sound Official, it says, question, how to refresh loops and samples in the media? It's not showing. All right, so if you're not seeing stuff in the media bay, the first thing I would always do, so say if we're here in the media bay and you're like, oh, I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see, is you'll see this little icon here is just to make sure that you clear all of the filters. So we're going to reset the attribute filters, and that way everything, like I had one classic example where I had a guy that was searching for a heavy metal accordion preset, and he had that in his filters and couldn't find anything. Now if you're going through, let's say, folders, and let's take a look at it in the large media bay, and we come over here, make sure that like when you go to like VST Sound, that these are checked for different factory presets, factory content. Just make sure that these are checked. Your user content, that all of these are checked as well. So it could be sometimes that people will have folders that are unchecked. I can't find any beatbox samples, like where the media bay isn't looking for them because it's unchecked there. So check your, see if you can reset your attributes filters and that the actual folders are checked. Okay. You see John Barry's comment about some users have an issue or the MIDI remotes are getting wiped. I'll see if I could look into that. Gerald Ely just stopped in to hit the like button. All right, Soul Sand Official says, is there a way in the media user presets to show only my presets? It's actually showing other plugins default presets that not done by me, like only user presets. All right, so if we are, let's say if we go here, so let's say, okay, I want to go to my VST Sound, there is just a user content folder. So I can say, okay, I just want to find my track presets for audio that I've made. So at this point, you could say, okay, I'm just looking for audio presets or multi presets. And if you're going from the right zone over here, we could just say, okay, when we jump back, we could just say, okay, instead of going into your loops and browsers, you just want to go to user presets. Let's go to track audio presets, and there's audio presets. Here's my instrument presets. So we could do stuff like that. Okay. So Mark Raven says, oh, I have a question mark button section in Cubase 15 Pro. How do I make it not? So let's say if we had the bottom zone here, like we could make that disappear, or the transport. It says I have a question, bottom section in Cubase 15 Pro. How do I make it not? So if you want to hide the lower zone, or if you want to hide the transport, you could also just kind of go to the settings here and turn off the lower zone or transport if needed. And Mark Rabin says, like I always, let me clear my throat. It says, like I always, I want it to always open in the other window. So if I want that, instead of opening in the lower zone, go to your preferences, go to settings, and we'll say, okay, let's go to our editors, and we can say double click opens in a window. So we just come right there, hit apply, hit OK. So now I'll have the lower zone closed. When I double click for the editor, it's going to open in a separate window. So again, preferences, settings, editors, double click opens in a window. All right, so I had a question that was about how to color multiple tracks the same color that was mailed in. So let's say I want to take these particular tracks. I'm going to select these tracks and I want to make them all the same color. So when we want to do that, what we want to do is just to select the color tool here, and now we could make sure that you don't have an event selected, but we have just the tracks. And when you come here, we can now colorize all of your tracks to the same color. All right, and we had one other question that was mailed in about how to utilize the arranger track see if I have my project open. Let me open it up. All right, so what the arranger track is really designed to do is to take an arrangement. So say you have like maybe a verse, chorus, a bridge, but you don't have like a full arrangement of it worked out. So we could right click and add an arranger track. And once we add our arranger track, what we could do is to define our different sections of our song. So let's say we have our project here. We want to now come over and say, okay, this will be our guitar solo. Let's say we want a little breakdown, and we have parts that are nested within parts, within parts, within parts. So we could define our different sections. We could hold down Option or Alt and double click to rename our particular event. So once we have this open, we could activate our arranger track, and we could see all of our parts here. And what we want to do is to create, so we've created these arranger events, and we want these arranger events to actually go into our arranger order. So I'm going to just simply drag these over in to create a different order of my project. So let's say if I play this now, instead of it playing linearly through the project, what I could do is as we hit play, just have our project now play in a non-linear manner. And then if we wanted to have a alternate play order, we could just make different arrangements. So this is good if we have like a 30-second version, a 60-second version, a 2-minute version of the same song. We could have one song with multiple arrangements that we could quickly identify without having to manually move and copy parts around. All right. So we have just a couple more minutes left. All right, let's see, Brett Mancini says, thank you, Greg. See y'all Friday. Bring presents. All right, Mark Ravens is saying the arranger track helped him finish so much material. Highly recommend it. And so does Stella's dog. All right. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. Give it a second. I think we're just about out of time. I thank everyone for all the great questions. All right. Okay, so I think we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. So once again, we'll have our last live stream on Friday. So we'll do our Zoom social meetup. So we'll do like a 2-hour live stream followed by our Zoom social meetup. With that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and thanks for creating such a wonderful community to learn about music creation using Steinberg products. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and goodbye. Take care.